Well, I'm Beth Romick, and I was asked to demonstrate how to make pecan butter. And so what I brought was the ingredients. It's dry corn and pecans. That's all that, the original had in it. You parch the corn and you parch the pecans. When you start with the first ingredient, which is the dry corn, you have to parch it. Put it in a pan, and we would kind of thin it all out. And you put it in the oven, 300 degrees, and it may take anywhere from 10 minutes to, 15 minutes. And you check on it and you kind of roll it, and so that it's getting dry. It needs to cool before you start pounding it. And with the pecans, you do the same thing. The pecans take usually just a little bit more time than the corn does. Using Grandma Whitebird's mortar and pestle, pounded the corn because it takes quite a while to do that. I have been making pecan butter since I was probably early teens, and it's a long, hard job. I can remember being in my Aunt Polly's kitchen, and they're cooking for a dinner, and they would holler and say, "Come in here, we need you to make this pecan butter." And I was like, "Oh, awesome." The corn has been parched, it's cool. The pecans have been parched, they're cool. You put the corn in and hand me the pestle, and I'm like, "Ooh, that's heavy." And you start pounding, you use a heavy end first. I was also told if I knock any of the corn out, you have to throw that away and start over. We were cooking for a funeral, and so I was real careful to do that. And the older ladies were sitting around at the table and kind of watching, and a couple of them were kind of giggling, and I was like, "Man, my arms are getting tired." And I was holding it like this and going up and down. One of my aunts said, "I can't take it anymore. Show her how to do it." And so what you do is when you hold it, you pick it up and you let your grip loose, and it drops, and it does the work for you. And when you're starting, you use the heavy end, and it's a little bit larger, and it has cuts in it, and it helps to break up the corn. And then when you get to a certain place, you turn it around, and you use the smaller end, and it makes the corn finer. It never really looks like flour or anything like that, but it gets pretty fine. And then you begin to add the pecans. And pecans have an oil in them, and it mixes with the corn, the pounded corn, and it begins to come together, and you keep adding the pecans and keep adding the pecans, and you keep pounding until it gets to a consistency that is where it holds together, kind of like dough. And then you put it in a pan and let it sit for a while. We used to put it in the refrigerator, and it would cool, and then we could cut it in small pieces. There was enough made to put on either each plate or a little bit on each table. I'm sure it was probably made for other things than funerals, but that's the only time that I have made it, unless someone has asked me to make it for, say, a meeting, for their dinner or something like that, and I will do that. The only way I know how to make pecan is with using the mortar and pestle. I've heard of people today that have made it, and they're using a food processor or a blender, and I will never do that. I think probably other tribes use it. I know the Quapaws did, and this belonged to Grandma Whitebird. And when my uncle died, he was 91, and it was his mother's, and so she'd had it, probably most of her life, probably at least a 200-year, legacy. And I'm very humbled and very proud that I can do this. I always saw that in the kitchen my whole life, and it's a very important part of my life.